Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. I can hardly believe it, but the regular season is already over as all 14 teams are now ready to head to the Windy City for the Big Ten tournament. But Purdue closed out the regular season with a pair of nail-biting wins over Wisconsin and Illinois. So we have plenty to discuss here on the show today. Going to talk about both those games, just some takeaways from the week. We're to that point now where I don't know that there really are tons of takeaways left. You know, these teams kind of are what they are at this point, but we'll talk about what I thought about the week a little bit. Talk a little bit as well, just about the regular season that was. Now that 31 games are in the books, we're on to postseason play, where, you know, if you lose, you're bounced from that tournament. And once you get through the Big Ten tournament, the next loss will be your last. So a lot to talk about here today. Take Purdue's temperature a little bit and see where they're at. So a lot to get to. Looking forward to this episode. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter. That's @BoilersBeyond. Got a lot of stuff there. I will certainly be watching all of the Big Ten tournament this week. So follow along those Wednesday, Thursday night games in all their glory. Be sure to follow along for some conversation there. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I will be doing a second episode this week. I'm going to record it Tuesday night in your feeds Wednesday morning. Q&A heading into the Big Ten tournament, answering your questions. Really don't have too much scheduled to talk about there. So it's going to go whatever direction you would like it to, but tweet those questions into me @BoilersBeyond, and I'll answer them on the show. So Purdue finishes the regular season 26-5, 15-5 in Big Ten play after a 63-61 win at Wisconsin and a 76-71 win over Illinois. Purdue finished strong, getting a pair of wins that they really needed. You know, Purdue had lost 4 out of 6 games coming into this 2-game stretch. So to be able to pick up a couple of wins, they weren't highlight reel wins necessarily. Purdue didn't run up the score by any means, but Purdue got a couple of wins that they really needed. This doesn't necessarily make all your worries go away. If you have worries about this Purdue team, it doesn't change a whole lot, but it does at least give you a good feeling that you won a couple games. You got the outright Big Ten championship taken care of. You did that by 3 games. So you have some momentum going into Chicago. And I know, look, a lot of folks are going to be pretty worried about the way Illinois came back in the second half of the game today. And while, yes, it's not ideal. Purdue was up over 20 points at one point. But you got to keep in mind, Purdue was doing a lot of things right, and things were really going Purdue's way at that point. The old water finds its level saying kind of happened, and Purdue won by 5. I don't know that I think that's the end of the world. Purdue didn't necessarily help itself all the time during that Illinois run, but nonetheless, Purdue gets a win. Purdue won both of these games despite not shooting particularly well. You look at that game at Wisconsin, Purdue goes 4 for 19 from the 3-point range, and 2 of those 4 makes were from Ethan Morton, which, you may or may not have expected. And then against Illinois, early on, it looked like those shots were going to fall for Purdue. They went 6 for 12 from 3 in the first half, and in the second half, they went 0 for 6, and really, I was thinking this during the game, I don't know when Purdue's last 3-point attempt in the game was, but it certainly was not necessarily late. Purdue really, really pumped the brakes on taking 3-pointers. They really focused on getting the ball inside because 6 for 18, again, I guess if you get down to the decimals, it is better than Purdue's season average. but it's still not all that great. So, look, we've talked about shooting a million times. I'm not going to keep pounding this into the ground, but we're 31 games in. The numbers are what they are. This Purdue team is not a great or even good three-point shooting team. They have guys who I think are really good three-point shooters, but the numbers don't necessarily reflect that incredibly well. It just is what it is. Purdue's kind of overcoming that. They're shooting just 32.7% from three as a team. Not great. Not great at all. So Purdue's overcoming that. The big news of the week, of course, was the starting lineup change. Mason Gillis got back in the starting lineup over Caleb First. Not much to say about that, so be it. It's not earth-shattering there. But what got the people going was Brandon Newman starting over Ethan Morton, and Brandon Newman has responded remarkably well. He brought some energy to that game against Indiana last Saturday. Matt Painter rewarded him with a start at Wisconsin, and as of now, I certainly think this lineup change is going to stay for a while, if not the rest of the season. A couple of really nice games on the defensive end, and that's kind of how this has all happened. You know, it's all done through defense, because for him, that's where a lot of the disconnect was. He was a very offensive-minded player, and while I think, you know, if you cut him open and see what's inside him, it's going to be an offensive-minded guy. But he's doing some really good things on the defensive end here. He's had really active hands, forced a number of steals. What did he force? 2 steals at Wisconsin and 3 steals against Illinois. Really good stuff there. That's what's been so nice to see lately for Brandon Newman, is that defensive energy, because it's not like he's really shooting the lights out of the ball. He knocked down a few on Sunday against Illinois, but still finished 3 for 8 and went 0 for 5, so 3 for 13 on the week. He's not shooting particularly great, but he knocked down some big free throws in both games, played good defense. We've talked plenty about his ups and downs here on this podcast, but to see him playing well at this time of the year is really welcoming for Purdue, because it certainly could be a difference maker going into the NCAA tournament. And I'd point out, too, that I think Ethan Morton has responded to this pretty well. Purdue does not win that game at Wisconsin without either Ethan Morton or Brandon Newman, because Brandon Newman knocked down big free throws, played really big defense. Ethan Morton hit a pair of threes in that game at Wisconsin when Purdue needed them desperately both times. Those came up huge for Purdue. And against Illinois, only had 2 points, I believe, but he had 4 steals. Played big-time defense on Terrence Shannon on one of those last possessions where he forced a turnover. That was huge. If you look at just the last month or two, really since early Big Ten play, Ethan Morton shooting the ball just fine. He's in the mid-30s percentage-wise. He had that really rough stretch early on, but as of now, Ethan Morton's doing just fine as a shooter. Purdue's getting good production from that 3 spot. It's not going to be a spot for them where they're getting 25 points a game. It's just not going to happen. But if Purdue can get solid defense there, cannot turn the ball over there, and just knock down the shots that come, then I think you have a lot to like about what Purdue's getting from that 3 spot, and kind of the 2 spot too, because they have played together more in the last couple games. So just from that off-ball guard spot, they're producing really nicely right now. I thought Trey Kaufman-Renn had a really good week, and I think if you look at the back half of his season, he's been quite good for Purdue. He continues to look much more comfortable out there, the game is coming to him a lot smoother. Early on, that wasn't necessarily his strong suit. He was trying to force things a little bit, but he's really adjusted nicely, and Purdue needed him to give them some good minutes in the first half against Illinois, and he really answered the call. He gave Purdue some really good minutes there. He even knocked down a 3 in that game. It's been a while since he even attempted a 3, let alone made one. But he's doing great there. If you listen to Matt Painter talk about Trey Kaufman-Renn, he's a guy who Matt Painter is remarkably high on. But he's in a tough spot because he's backing up Zach Edey. So, I don't know what the future is going to hold for that spot, whether Zach Edey comes back or not. But when it's Trey Kaufman's time, I think he's going to do some really good things there. It's pretty rare that you hear Matt Painter talk about someone that highly and they don't pan out. So I'm very high on what he can do, and I think that you're really seeing a bit of a glimpse of what he can offer right now. I did think Illinois did as good of a job as anyone all season playing Zach Edey. And it's interesting because they don't have that big-time height at the center spot. They don't have the skyscraper 7-footers there. But what they do have is a lot of height and length everywhere else on the court. You look at Coleman Hawkins, who I guess played the 5 a little bit today, but guys like Coleman Hawkins, Terrence Shannon, Matthew Mayer, even Luke Goody's pretty tall and pretty long. I mean, they're a long athletic team, and that length gave Zach Edey some problems. They really swarmed him well. He only had 2 turnovers, which I guess I didn't realize because it felt like more. But, you limit him to 17 and 6, and I know that's a pretty good game for literally anybody, including Zach Edey. But on 6 of 13, they made him uncomfortable there in the second half a little bit. There were a few times where he got the ball on the block or close to it and had to move a lot more than he would have liked to get an open shot. And I think it was 2 or 3 possessions in a row where they missed pretty badly. And that was exactly what Illinois wanted. Now, I don't think that's necessarily some blueprint to stopping Zach Edey, because not every team has the absurd length that Illinois does. But overall, I thought they did a nice job on him. And again, as you saw, when Illinois got back in that game in the second half, it was during that stretch where Purdue went 0 for 6 from 3. The offense is designed for those threes to go down. The offense is centered around the idea that those threes will be made. So it's a bit of a tough spot for Purdue. It's not something that I think you're going to change. It just is what it is. But that certainly played a role in Illinois getting back in the game. And then, some senior nights are really worth diving into and getting romantic about. Others are what they are. Certainly this wasn't the tearjerker of a senior night, the way that 2011 was with Jawan Johnson and Etuan Moore, or 2018 with Vince Edwards, Isaac Haas, Dakota Mathias, and PJ Thompson. But, you should recognize David Jenkins Jr. and Matt Frost. Certainly for Frost, it's a bummer that he tore his ACL and, couldn't do anything this year. But, with David Jenkins Jr., he's not been some giant impact like scorer or defender or, some big stat sheet guy. But when you hear the players talk about David Jenkins Jr., they talk about his maturity, his experience, his presence. I think that's a pretty big deal. I really do. I think that if Purdue didn't have mature leadership in the locker room, it'd be pretty tough for them to do what they've done. And it's certainly a credit to everyone else in that locker room as well. But you got to give Jenkins some credit. He's been pretty open. He came to Purdue not expecting to be coming off the bench. He thought he was going to be the starting point guard. And that's not what happened. That's not what's happened at all. He played 9 minutes on his senior night. 2 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist. No assists. It's not like he has been some huge part of this team playing 14 minutes a game. But what he's given you is a lot of intangibles that are intangibles. You can't measure them the way you can on-court production. He's been a nice pickup for this team, without a doubt about it. I think he's helped these young guards mature into Big Ten players. So I just wanted to give a little attention to him real quick, because obviously, as I said, some senior days are a little bit more than others, and this is one of the quieter ones, but he certainly deserves some attention. So where do we sit now? Purdue is heading into the Big Ten tournament. They won the regular season, and they did so in pretty impressive fashion, winning it by 3 games. The finish wasn't red hot. Purdue won their last 2, but lost 4 of their last 8. So how does Purdue feel here? I think there's definitely some reason for concern, and I'll add that everybody has reason for concern. You can look across the national landscape of college basketball. I don't think you're going to find a team out there that doesn't have reason for concern. You look at Alabama. They certainly have their own problems, and getting NCAA tournament media around them is not going to help those at all. Houston hasn't played anybody. Kansas, they're damn good, but they have some of these games where they just get down big and claw their way out of it. Is that sustainable? I don't know. We'll find out. But every team has their concerns. Purdue's not shooting well. Purdue's a solid defensive team, but they're not elite there. They're sitting 23rd in defensive efficiency at KenPom. That's good. That's one of the better ones that Purdue's had in recent memory, and certainly infinitely better than their 93rd last year. But, it's not elite. Purdue can be turnover prone. Now, the last 2 games, they've been all right there. The number hasn't been too alarming. 11 versus Illinois, and what did Wisconsin do with this? I can't even figure this out on the Wisconsin stat broadcast, but there you go, 12 against Wisconsin. So more than you would have liked against Wisconsin, but nonetheless, 12 or less isn't the end of the world. But you combine all of that, and, there are reasons for concern. The last 1 seed in the NCAA tournament at this point looks like it's going to come down to Purdue or UCLA. And now that UCLA beat Arizona on Saturday night, it's a real conversation. Joe Lunardi moved up UCLA to be the last number 1 seed in his bracket. We will see what a lot of the other prognosticators have in their brackets this week. I never am a believer that conference tournaments make some giant difference in seeding, but if you're a Purdue fan, you should probably root for UCLA to not win their conference title. And I think furthermore, root for them to lose to someone besides Arizona. Just bad loss might not be the right term, but maybe lose to someone who's not so great. You want that last 1 seed. I fully believe that. I know there's the conversation, well, do you take the 2 in Louisville instead of the last 1? No, I don't believe in that at all. I think you take that 1 seed if you can get it, no matter where it puts you. It can send you to Greenland for all I care. If you've got that 1 seed, you're in a better spot. Don't lose sight, though, of what Purdue has done this season. Good friend Alan Karpik of mine told me this week that in the last 40 years, only 6 teams have won the Big Ten by 3 or more games. That's pretty impressive. 6 teams in 40 years to do that. That is quite impressive. Purdue did that this year. And I know it's not the top-heavy Big Ten that some of the past seasons have had. You look, as I'm recording this right now, Rutgers and Northwestern are playing, and Northwestern will either be the 2 or the 9 seed in the Big Ten tournament, which is just utterly ridiculous. But it's still a conference with, 8 or 9 NCAA tournament teams? That's pretty substantial. You're playing a lot of good teams. Maybe not a lot of great teams, but a lot of good teams, and that wears on you. You know, this season was supposed to be a retooling one. Maybe rebuilding probably isn't the right word, but certainly retooling. And it quickly turned into something way, way bigger. Expectations shifted very quickly. You know, the plane hadn't landed from Portland yet, coming back to West Lafayette, and fans were already talking about the Final Four. That's just kind of the way this season has gone, and Purdue has lived up to anything you could have realistically hoped for at any point in the season. Maybe 8 games ago, you wouldn't have wanted Purdue to lose 4 of their next 8, but outside of that, even at the start of the new year when Purdue was starting conference play back up, if you say you're going 13-5 from here on out, you probably take that. It's gone very well. And Big Ten awards are going to be announced on Tuesday. I expect that Zach Edey will win Big Ten Player of the Year. I expect Braden Smith to be part of the all-freshman team. And I do think, Matt Painter should and will win Big Ten Coach of the Year. I say that. He won it by 3 games. Northwestern's fallen off a little bit here lately. I think Matt Painter is going to get Big Ten Coach of the Year, and I think he certainly should get Big Ten Coach of the Year. We'll see how all of those dominoes fall, but just remarkable how fast this season went, how crazy this season has been. It's nuts. It really is, but another season at Mackey Arena is in the books. Purdue will not return there until November. When they do, they will have a Big Ten championship banner in there, at least one, and we will see if they can add anything from a Big Ten tournament or an NCAA banner. But as I said, Q&A style show that I will record on Tuesday night. Send those questions my way. You guys were awesome last time with that, so would love to get more good questions in from you all, but that's all I have for today. Thank you for spending your time with me all regular season long. It's been a blast. I will be back in your feeds on Wednesday morning, but until then, be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. Going to have a lot to talk about there. And subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be back here Wednesday morning, but enjoy some of those mid-major championship games in the meantime, and take care.